It's almost surreal to consider that as the world teetered on the brink of World War I, the United States government was handling its most sensitive diplomatic communications with a level of security that feels almost, well, quaint today.
Quaint is one word for it. Shockingly lax might be another.
Right. Imagine State Department code clerks. Their attention apparently more fixed on baseball scores than on the momentous historical significance of the very messages passing through their fingers.
Yeah, there's that quote, isn't there? Daily history passed through their hands in one long stream, and they thought less of it than of the baseball scores.
Exactly. It paints such an astonishing picture of a bygone era.
It certainly highlights a striking contrast. The world is heading towards this unprecedented conflict. And yet, the people guarding America's secrets seem almost more absorbed in, well, the everyday stuff back home.
It makes you wonder about the mindset, then, regarding espionage, secure communication.
Absolutely. What did that lack of concern really signify?
And that's exactly the fascinating territory we're venturing into in this deep dive. We're going to explore the genesis of American code breaking, specifically through the experiences of Herbert Yardley within the State Department code room.
And we've got some great source material for this.
We do. Excerpts from Yardley's own book, Building the American Black Chamber, plus the actual text of its first chapter.
So you get a first-hand account of just how vulnerable things were.
Almost unbelievable, really. And the initial resistance to even setting up a dedicated code-breaking unit.
So for you, the listener, our aim here is to kind of uncover how one man's persistent curiosity really brought a critical national security weakness into sharp focus.
Right, and how that ultimately led to the birth of American signal intelligence.
We'll be looking for those aha moments, the casual security, the impact one person can actually have.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The State Department Code Room, 1913.
Yeah.
Yardley describes this surprisingly spacious area. It overlooks the White House.
Nice view, at least.
You'd think. There's this big oak telegraph table, always busy, cabinets just packed with telegram copies, and these central desks for the code clerks.
The ones doing the actual encoding and decoding?
Exactly. A small team. It sounds almost like a regular office, maybe a bit smoky.
But then you get the details that make you pause.
Oh yeah. Minor officials, even sometimes the secretary himself would just wander in.
Wander in?
Yeah, especially after, diplomatic functions where maybe the drinks had been flowing a bit.
Yeah.
They'd stand around arguing about policy or sometimes just ask trivial questions like how to spell something.
In the code room, where sensitive messages are being processed.
Right there.
That air of good fellowship Yardley mentions. It sounds almost dangerously naive, doesn't it?
It does, considering the information, the global situation.
It really suggests, maybe, a fundamental lack of understanding about the emerging threats, or perhaps just the nature of signals intelligence itself.
And into this environment steps Herbert Yardley. Starts as a young telegraph operator, totally new to deciphering foreign codes. Okay.
But he gets fascinated. He develops this intense curiosity, this nagging question.
Which was?
Why did America have no bureau for the reading of secret diplomatic code and cipher telegrams of foreign governments?
A pretty fundamental question to ask.
It becomes his obsession. He basically says, I would devote my life to cryptography.
Wow, quite a commitment.
So he starts trying to teach himself. Goes to the Congressional Library, looks for books, military pamphlets.
Finding what he could.
But he quickly realizes it's all very basic stuff. He concludes he's going to have to do real pioneer work.
And that self-driven aspect is so important, isn't it?
Definitely.
It highlights his curiosity, sure, but also the sheer lack of any established system or expertise in the U.S. government at that time. He was basically starting from zero.
Recognizing a gap nobody else seemed to see or maybe care about.
Right.
So his pioneer work, it begins by getting copies of coded messages from foreign embassies in D.C.
How did he manage that? Through, let's say, some well-placed friendships. He starts working on them, meticulously creating frequency tables.
Painstaking work. He later mentioned needing lots of typists just for that.
Yes. Then comes his first big break. He gets a 500-word coded message. Colonel House to President Wilson.
Okay, high-level stuff. House was in Germany at the time.
He was. And Yardley cracks this message in under 2 hours.
2 hours, seriously.
He was astounded himself, especially because this message probably went over British cables.
Who had their own code breakers, presumably.
Definitely. Yardley couldn't believe Wilson would use what he called schoolboy ciphers.
By which he meant very basic, easily breakable encryption.
Exactly. He even wondered if this kind of weak security might explain some of Wilson's political failure.
That's eye-opening. It shows Yardley's skill, obviously, but also this massive vulnerability right at the top.
Yeah.
If a junior clerk could read it that easily, who else might have been?
Yeah.
You have to wonder how much sensitive information was just out there.
And it wasn't a one-off. He later talks about the messages from the American mission to Russia, supposedly secret dispatches. He said they were so elementary, he used them as, quote, training examples in the training of student cryptographers.
Training examples? Wow.
Think about that. Classified communications from a major diplomatic mission used for beginner lessons.
That really drives home just how underdeveloped American cryptography was then. It wasn't a minor slip-up.
No.
It seems like a systemic failure to grasp how important secure communication was becoming globally.
Yeah.
Yardley's successes weren't just personal wins. They were huge red flags for national security.
So, armed with this knowledge, this proof, Yardley tries to raise the alarm.
Goes to his bosses.
Yep. Presents his findings. He even spends nearly 2 years dedicating over 1,000 hours writing this detailed memo, Solution of American Diplomatic Codes.
Okay, a major effort. And the reaction?
Initially, just disbelief. His superior actually said, "You mean to say our codes are not safe? I don't believe it."
Oof, that must be frustrating.
Can you imagine? You found this critical flaw and you're just shut down.
Well, I suppose there might have been some complacency, a reluctance to believe their existing systems were that bad.
Maybe they didn't grasp the technical side.
That's possible too. It often takes something really compelling or maybe a crisis to shake up those ingrained bureaucratic beliefs.
But Yardley, he was persistent. He didn't give up. There's even that clever story about the office safe.
Ah, yes. Tell us about that.
So his superior changes the combination on the safe holding the code books, has a private chuckle about it, apparently,
Okay.
and forgets to tell Yardley the new combination.
Oops.
So Yardley sees the chuckle, thinks about who's prominent in the news. It was Mrs. Galt, President Wilson's fiancée, and he figures the combination might be linked to her name in the phone book. Tries it.
Yeah.
Opens the safe, just like that, without ever being told the combination.
Huh. That's brilliant. It really shows his analytical mind, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not just codes, but people too.
And maybe a bit of showmanship, to make a point his superiors couldn't ignore.
A very tangible demonstration of his skills. Hard to dismiss that.
And eventually, finally, his constant pushing starts to get somewhere, especially with the looming threat of war.
The context was changing rapidly.
Exactly. He manages to get a crucial meeting with Major Vandeman, often called the father of military intelligence.
A key figure. How did that happen?
Colonel Gibbs facilitated it, and Van Diemen, he saw Yardley's value immediately.
You recognized the potential.
Right away. Van Diemen becomes instrumental in getting Yardley transferred out of state into the War Department.
Which wasn't straightforward, I gather.
No, Secretary Phillips at State was reluctant, but Colonel Bibbs really pushed for it. Phillips eventually gave in, reportedly saying something like, "If the War Department wants you badly enough to come after you, I guess I'll have to let you go."
That really highlights the different priorities, perhaps. State focused on diplomacy, war increasingly focused on, tangible security threats.
Yeah, the urgency was clearly felt differently.
And that transfer was a real turning point. It shows how important it is to have champions, people in the right places who recognize talent and can push for change.
Absolutely. Van Diemen's support was critical.
Overcoming that bureaucratic inertia that had held things up at State. And of course, the war situation added that necessary urgency.
Definitely broke down some barriers. So let's just pull together the main points here for everyone listening.
Okay.
We started with this remarkably casual, almost non-existent approach to U.S. cryptographic security before World War I.
A real vulnerability.
Then you have Herbert Yardley, his incredible self-teaching journey, his early successes, cracking codes,
Driven purely by his own initiative.
followed by the significant bureaucratic hurdles he faced just trying to get anyone to listen.
That disbelief and resistance.
And finally, how the growing threat of war, combined with key figures like Van Diemen recognizing the need, led to creating a proper American intelligence capability.
It really required that external pressure and internal advocacy.
It's still pretty stunning how exposed the U.S. seems to have been at such a critical time.
It truly is. And it's a powerful reminder, isn't it? That sometimes it takes one dedicated person to spot and really push to fix these critical weaknesses.
Weaknesses that might otherwise just stay hidden.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In plain sight, almost.
And that brings us to a final thought for you, the listener. Think about that significance of individual initiative. Spotting and tackling these huge vulnerabilities, especially within big, complex systems like governments. And how these seemingly mundane settings, like that State Department code room we described,
Yeah, just an office.
can actually be the stage for these pivotal historical moments, all because one person got curious and determined.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other potential weaknesses, maybe in different areas entirely, might exist right now, just waiting for someone with that same dedication to bring them into the light?
It's a compelling thought.
And this deep dive into Yardley's early days, well, it's really just scratching the surface.
Oh, definitely.
The story of the American Black Chamber he went on to lead is fascinating in its own right. Its impact on global intelligence was pretty significant.
So we definitely encourage you, if this has piqued your interest, to look more into Herbert Yardley and the early history of American code breaking.
Yeah, it's a story full of intrigue, innovation, and just the surprising power of one person's focus and dedication to really change things.